Hello, and welcome back to the world. I am on my slightly janky bone meal farm again. I think I'm mostly just testing it out at the moment, but I'm probably gonna end up making one that's more consistent in the future anyway, that probably just works on like pumpkins or melons, because that generally is more consistent. The bone meal that comes from this is basically completely used in the moss farm because it's really the only thing I need bone meal for at the moment. But anyway, today I want to work on a new area. I'm going to be building, first I'm going to be building a little farm to help me get a larger quantity of mud, because getting mud the way that I did it last time is really slow. But after that, I'm gonna be making a mine entrance because I think that'll be a good way to get more stone. So when I need stone, I'll just continue mining that mine deeper and deeper so that I can collect more stone. I do, however, get slightly distracted before I start working on any of that, because I walk into my mine to collect stuff and end up just digging out like half of the geode. But it didn't take too terribly long, I guess. Okay, admittedly I get very distracted from my original goal because I then go and start doing some landscaping to help spawn-proof my land. I don't get terribly far with this, but it's mostly just like a layer of moss and moss carpet. So, once again, this one actually took kinda long, but I will get to the other things. I just got very distracted starting off this time. And immediately after that, I go netherite mining. This does not come in handy this episode because I still refuse to use any of the diamond or netherite tools that I make, because I am kinda terrified to break them, especially the netherite ones, because this took way longer than expected. Even with beds, this took just unreasonably long amount of time to get enough netherite for what I wanted. Between the time this first bed exploded and I put the netherite that I collected into the furnace is about 3 hours of time. Yeah, I don't like netherite mining, especially with beds, because beds suck. They do a lot of damage, and they also just, they cause a bunch of fire, which you have to put out to make sure you're not missing anything. And also you're in the nether, and hoglins kept spawning, and hoglins are like one of my least favorite mobs, maybe ever. Definitely not the worst, but they're up there. But until I can get a good gunpowder farm to make TNT, I'm not going netherite mining again, because I do not enjoy it. It kinda suck, especially with beds. I probably died way too many times to the beds because I wasn't paying attention, but they still did kill me, so I'm gonna blame the beds. Insert joke 999 about being distracted. And I guess just so you know, I did use the 8 netherite ingots I managed to get. Like I said though, not going to end up using them because I'm afraid of breaking them, but I end up using it to make my full set of armor, both of my pickaxes, and I believe my axe into netherite. And I also make a diamond sword to also be made into netherite. But back to talking about actually building said mine that I was going to work on. The first thing I wanted to do is to make the road over to where this mine is going to be. I decided I wanted to build the mine up where the mountain village currently is, which means that village is probably gonna end up being torn down at some point. I haven't done it yet, but it's definitely going to happen. One of the things I was going to need for this road, and wanted quite a bit of going forward, was mud. And I didn't want to keep making it manually, so I designed myself a little machine that would help me generate a lot more mud a lot quicker, so that I just had to place down dirt, and it would make me a bunch of mud. Luckily, the only thing I really struggled to get was that I needed a lot of redstone for this. Because I needed observers, pistons, and redstone dust, and actually a pretty large amount of repeaters as well, which meant, yeah, time to go redstone mining. The first redstone mining trip went pretty quick. I got a decent amount of redstone ore and then used my fortune pickaxe once I got back up to the surface to turn all of that into a pretty large quantity of redstone dust. The only problem with this is I immediately had to put almost 2 whole stacks in for just redstone dust, and I needed almost another 2 stacks of pistons, which amounted to using almost all of my redstone dust immediately. But with just a little bit of cobblestone mining, I was able to get all of those pistons made pretty easy. Which is one more redstone component done for this farm. Realizing that I was going to need a pretty bonkers amount of redstone for this, it was time to head back down into the mines to collect more ore. But after a decently eventful mining trip, I ended up with a decent amount of ore that should be enough to finish this project. After that, everything else was pretty easy to put together into this little shulker box. The only thing is I completely forgot to grab my soul sand, because, I don't know, I forgot, but yeah, you need 1 soul sand too. Also, I am building this over by my slime farm, and am once again using Lightmatica to copy this over from my redstone testing world, and since, you know, I was asked what Lightmatica does, basically, it makes hologram of the build, and then you can use that to see where you're building stuff. And yeah, that's about it. And the mud farm itself is also very simple. Basically, the gist of it is I'm gonna be placing dirt up against a piston. The piston will push that in front of a dispenser. The dispenser will put water in it so that it will become mud. And then, as it keeps going, the mud will all be collected into one big block that I can go back after the fact and mine up. Probably the hardest thing about designing this was the activation, and for that I used these walls into observers. Basically, the wall will move slightly when mud connects to it, which will trigger the observer to trigger the redstone, which triggers the pistons. Oh, and heads up, you're gonna need a lot of bottles to run this farm, because you basically have to fill up this entire system with glass bottles and water bottles, or it has a tendency to break. Just a heads up, you will need a lot of glass bottles if you decide to build this. Speaking of which, I'm gonna make a more detailed video on this, I think, if people are interested, but I have a lot of other stuff I'm going to do in this video, so if I do, it's going to be in a separate, like, tutorial type video. But, to run this is very simple. You just fill this chest over here up with dirt. You get a little bit in your hand, you place a piece of dirt in front of the dispenser first, and then you just hold right click while looking at this piston. I use a little trick to have Minecraft basically hold it for me, but you don't have to do that. You can just hold it yourself or put a weight on your mouse or whatever. And about 14 minutes later, when this piston does not push this block out of the way immediately, you know that the farm has finished. And when you look up, you will have yourself a large brick of mud, which is a pretty decent amount. It's basically all of the dirt that I put in that chest converted into mud. But to put that into a better context, that equated to about 20 and almost one more stacks of mud, which means about 21 stacks of mud every time you run the machine, which I think is pretty good. But with my mud now obtained, I can officially start work on the middle segment of my road to the mine. Because that is what we've been working towards, even though I have gotten distracted a couple times and have had a couple side projects to get us here. We are still working on the mine, I promise. But since this road is so similar to the dirt path between my house and the village, I decided not to spend too much time on it in this video because, well, I've built this road a couple times now, so I don't think it's too necessary to go into massive detail. Basically, it's a mainly path road with coarse dirt and mud blocks thrown in to add just a bit more variation to the road. Though, one big difference between this road and the other ones is I actually remember to put the wooden slabs on this one, so this one is actually easily walkable, unlike most of the other ones I've made so far. The next section of this road I build is the deep slate section that's coming directly off of the city, which means it's a pretty familiar road again. It's a mixture of different types of deep slate, mainly cobbled, brick, tiled, and chiseled. And since this is part of the city roads, I'm also going to be adding slabs and stairs to this one to make sure that it's easy to walk through. Next things next, and before I finish that third section of road, I start collecting large quantities of moss, because I want to start working towards landscaping the area right where the mine is to help the road meld in a little better with the ground. Basically, I just grab some moss and start trying to smooth out some of the terrain next to the road to try and make it fit in a little better and look a little better for aesthetic reasons, because while this mine is functional for making me a lot of stone, I also want to be sure it actually looks good. And while I am definitely just covering up caves at the moment, I do know that at some point I am gonna have to come back and actually light them up, because the noises that will be coming out of them if I just let them stay dark could get slightly annoying. And while I will not be doing so in this video, it's already becoming obvious at this point in the landscaping that some of these townhouses are going to have to go. They're basically right in the way of where I'm building this terrain, and they're just sort of sunk into it, and I think it looks kinda janky, and I don't really want that, so probably soon I'm gonna come back through here and clear out a lot of the townhouses from this village. And as I do this landscaping, I start realizing that you guys might not want to see this whole thing done in first person, because it's fine and all, but there's definitely a better way of doing this. And that is the replay mod. Yeah, we haven't had the replay mod here for a little bit, but I finally remembered to record something with it again. Yeah, we'll have a little bit of replay mod this time around. But now that I've run out of moss, that's probably going to be all of the terraforming I do for now. And now for a sentence I wish you guys weren't used to hearing by now. I got here getting ready to build the mine entrance. I left the computer for a bit because I was doing stuff. I hit pause, and I came back and forgot to unpause it. So, now we're here. And I am mildly annoyed again, because this makes sad. Very sad. But I guess I'll live with it, even though it's obnoxious. After I put that mine entrance together, like I said before, this whole thing is mostly meant to be a way for me to get stone, but I just wanted it to look a little better. So I'm gonna start working on the tunnel so I kinda know what I'm going for while I'm going downward, so that I sorta have some sort of idea. The only thing of major note is that I am smelting up stone as I go to patch in dirt and these holes near the entrance because I just don't think they look very great and I don't want it to show. So like eventually I'll also end up probably terraforming over top of the mine entrance to make it blend into the area a bit better. But for now, I'm just mostly gonna finish off this episode by digging down a tunnel and building some supports in it to make sure it looks good. The tunnel's going to be about as tall as the entrance, but it's going to curve down so that it is going down pretty averagely paced, but it's going to stay about the same height the entire time, just slowly moving downward. Then, after fiddling with the entrance supports a little bit, I decide to finish up the road. So I grab some cobblestone, some gravel, and some andesite, and begin finishing up the road right next to the mine and make it this more rocky pathway than the others. And after fiddling with the supports even more, because I could not figure out a good design for them, I ended up with this half wooden, half deep slate tile design that I think turned out pretty good. It's very dark, and I think it works well against the lighter stone. Maybe once I get into the deep slate level, I'll make a slightly different type of support that will contrast differently, but for now I think these ones work really well against the normal stone. And then last thing for those supports is I decided to hang some lanterns instead of using torches because lanterns just look better. So now we also have a good lighting source in the tunnelway, and I think I will eventually add some railways in here, but not right now. With that, I think I'm gonna end off this video with a little cinematic shot of the mine and maybe just what I've done so far in this world. But aside from that, I think that's going to be all from today. So, see you later, and have a good day.